The rope was already around her neck when the rancher said those 5 words that changed everything. In Bitter Creek Valley, Wyoming Territory, where the morning sun painted the dust red like dried blood, Eliza Caro stood on a wooden crate beneath a hastily built gallows. The crowd below her seethed with the kind of righteous anger that only comes when people need someone to blame. They called her dirty, not because of the Lakota blood that ran through her veins, though that was part of it. Not because she washed the clothes of saloon girls, though that offended their sensibilities too. No, they needed someone to blame for the cholera that had taken 17 souls last month, and a half-breed woman who touched their dead with her healing herbs made the perfect scapegoat. Before we dive into the story, if you're watching this and you've ever felt judged for who you are, this tale of unexpected love and redemption in the harsh frontier will touch your soul. Click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss tomorrow's powerful story. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how our community spans the globe. Now let's continue with the story. Judge Cornelius Pike stood before the crowd like a preacher at a revival, his white beard catching the wind as he read from a paper that shook in his hands. Not from fear, but from excitement. Eliza Caro, you stand accused of moral contamination, of bringing disease and corruption to our Christian community through your heathen practices and unclean associations. The words were made up. The crime invented just 3 days ago, when Pike's own nephew had died from the cholera. The law didn't matter when fear ruled hearts. Eliza kept her chin high, though the rough hemp scratched her throat. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. When death comes, meet it like the sunrise. Her wrists were bound behind her back, but she refused to let them see her shake. The crowd wanted tears, wanted begging. She gave them neither. Some called out slurs about her mixed blood. Others spat at the ground near the gallows. Mrs. Henderson, whose laundry Eliza had done for 3 years, stood in the front row with stones in her apron pockets. Pike raised his hand for silence, savoring his moment of power. Do any speak for this woman before God's justice is done? The question was ceremony. No one would dare challenge the mob's hunger for blood. The executioner, a traveling man who'd arrived just for this occasion, tested the lever that would drop the crate. Everything was ready. Pike nodded to him, and the crowd held its breath. That's when hoofbeats thundered down Main Street. Sam Hayworth rode his horse straight through the crowd, people scattering like startled chickens. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the dirt hard. I speak for her, Pike. My brother needs a wife, and I'm claiming her under Section 7 of the Territorial Marriage Protection Act. The crowd erupted like a disturbed hornet's nest. Sam Hayworth stood his ground, one hand resting on the colt at his hip, not threatening but ready. Pike's face turned the color of raw beef, his carefully orchestrated execution suddenly derailed by one of the most powerful men in the valley. Sam owned the largest cattle operation for 200 miles. When winter came hard and supplies ran low, it was Hayworth beef that kept the town fed. Even a mob thought twice about crossing him. You can't be serious, Hayworth, Pike spluttered, his composure cracking. This woman is contaminated. She consorts with whores and practices savage medicine. She's the reason good Christian folk are dying. Sam stepped closer to the gallows, his spurs ringing in the sudden quiet. Funny thing about cholera, Judge. It don't care about bloodlines or who washes whose clothes. But if you want to hang an innocent woman to make yourself feel powerful, you'll have to explain to this town why they won't be getting any beef this winter. The threat hung in the air heavier than the rope around Eliza's neck. She watched this drama unfold with disbelief. She'd seen Sam Hayworth maybe twice in her life, always from a distance. Why would he save her? Pike's eyes darted between Sam and the crowd, calculating. Your brother hasn't shown his face in 2 years. How do we know he even wants a wife? Tom's wants aren't your concern, Sam replied, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Section 7 says any unmarried woman facing execution for non-capital crimes can be claimed for rehabilitation through matrimony, unless you're saying the territorial laws don't apply in Bitter Creek. It was a masterful trap. Pike had used those same laws to justify his authority. To deny them now would undermine everything. Mrs. Henderson pushed forward. She's diseased, Sam. Would you really bring that into your home? Sam turned his cold gaze on her. The only disease I see here is fear making good people act like rabid dogs. Tom needs someone who understands judgment. Someone who knows what it's like to be condemned for existing. His words carried weight that silenced even the boldest voices. Everyone knew about the fire 2 years ago. How Tom had tried to save his parents. How he'd emerged, scarred beyond recognition. Pike made one last attempt. The marriage must be legitimate, consummated. Will your brother even be capable? The crowd shifted uncomfortably at the crude question. Sam's jaw tightened. My brother is more man than most here, scars and all. Now cut her down, or I'll do it myself, and remember every face that tries to stop me when winter comes calling. The executioner looked to Pike, who finally nodded with bitter defeat. As the man climbed to remove the noose, Sam called up to Eliza. You'll come to the ranch. Work as housekeeper until Tom decides about marriage. Try to run, and I'll bring you back here myself. Eliza found her voice hoarse from the rope's pressure. I accept your terms, but the moment I get a chance, I'm gone. This isn't rescue. It's just a different kind of prison. Sam's smile was grim. We'll see about that. The journey to Hayworth Ranch took them through 30 miles of badlands that seemed designed to break spirits. Eliza rode behind Sam on his horse, her wrists still bearing rope marks, her neck bruised purple from the noose. Neither spoke as they crossed dried creek beds and navigated narrow paths between towering red rocks. The landscape was beautiful in its desolation, a place where only the strongest survived, much like the people who called it home. When they crested the final ridge, the ranch spread before them like something from a dream turned to nightmare. The main house stood magnificent but neglected, its wraparound porch sagging in places, windows clouded with 2 years of dust. Beyond it, the barn was nothing but blackened timber and memories. But strangest of all was the bunkhouse, where lamplight glowed despite the afternoon Sunday. Sam pointed to it. Tom lives there now. Won't step foot in the main house since the fire. They dismounted near the well, and Eliza got her first real look at her salvation-turned-prison. Ranch hands stopped their work to stare. She recognized the look in their eyes. Not quite hostility, but certainly not welcome. Sam led her to the main house, pushing open the door to reveal a interior frozen in time. Dust cloths covered furniture. Family photographs sat on the mantel, their faces watching like ghosts. You'll stay here. Kitchen's through there. Tom's meals get left outside the bunkhouse door. Don't try to talk to him. Don't push. He'll come around or he won't. Eliza walked to the kitchen window that faced the bunkhouse. A shadow moved behind the curtains, then quickly disappeared. What happened in the fire? Sam's voice went flat. Tom heard our mother screaming. Ran into the barn even though it was already coming down. Got her out, but she died in his arms. Father's heart gave out, watching it happen. Tom blames himself for not being faster. The weight of that tragedy hung between them. Why me? Eliza finally asked. You could have found him any woman. Why save someone the whole town wants dead? Sam was quiet for a long moment. Because my brother thinks his scars make him a monster. Maybe someone who knows what it's like to be called contaminated can show him different. Or maybe I'm just tired of watching him die slowly in that bunkhouse. He headed for the door, then paused. There's food in the pantry. Well, water's clean. Don't give me reason to regret this. After Sam left, Eliza stood alone in the dusty kitchen. She could run now, take a horse, and disappear into the Badlands. But curiosity held her. Through the window, she saw the curtain move again in the bunkhouse. She began opening cabinets, finding ingredients. Her grandmother always said healing started in the kitchen. If she was going to be a prisoner here, at least she could cook. As the sun set, she placed a bowl of soup outside the bunkhouse door. The same healing soup her grandmother made, with wild sage and bone broth. She knocked once and retreated. From the main house window, she watched. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, the door cracked open. A hand emerged, scarred and careful, and took the bowl. The door closed quickly, but it was a beginning. Every morning for a week, Eliza left food outside Tom's door. Every evening, she found the empty dishes returned. She began adding small touches, a sprig of prairie sage with breakfast, a wildflower with dinner. Then came the notes, written in her careful hand. Yarrow helps with old wounds. Elderflower for peace. Wild mint for courage. She never saw him take the meals, but sometimes she felt him watching from behind those dusty curtains. On the 8th day, she found something unexpected beside the empty bowl. A small wooden horse, carved with delicate skill despite being made by scarred hands. She held it up to the light, admiring the detail. The mane flowed like real hair. The eyes held spirit. A response without words, but a response nonetheless. She placed it on the kitchen windowsill where he could see she treasured it. That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Doc Abigail Foster rode up in her weathered buggy, medical bag in hand. The ranch hands whispered among themselves. The doc never came out this far unless someone was dying. Eliza met her at the door, wary. In town, even the doctor had stood silent at her near execution. But Abigail's first words surprised her. "I came to check on the woman who survived Cornelius Pike's noose." Not many can claim that distinction. They sat at the kitchen table while Abigail examined Eliza's neck, checking the bruising. "I voted against the hanging," the doctor said quietly. "Not that my vote mattered. Pike had them stirred into a frenzy." She pulled out books from her bag, medical texts, anatomy guides. "I've been looking for an apprentice, someone who already understands herbs and healing. Interested?" Eliza stared at the books like they were gold. "Why would you teach me?" "The town already thinks I'm contaminated." "Because the town is full of fools who'd rather blame a scapegoat than admit cholera comes from bad water," Abigail replied sharply. "And because I've seen your grandmother's work. She taught you well before she passed. Traditional medicine and modern science together could save lives." She glanced toward the bunkhouse. "Besides, this ranch could use someone with medical knowledge. How is Tom?" "I've never met him," Eliza admitted. "He takes the meals I leave but won't show himself." Abigail nodded knowingly. "The burns were severe, half his body. I treated him after the fire, but he wouldn't let me continue once the worst danger passed. Pride and shame are dangerous infections, sometimes worse than any physical wound. They spent the afternoon studying, Abigail teaching, about infection and fever, while Eliza shared her grandmother's knowledge of plants. As the sun began setting, they walked outside to identify medicinal plants in the ranch garden. That's when Eliza saw him. Tom stood at his window, visible for the first time. The late sunlight illuminated his silhouette. The left side of his face bore the fire's mark, skin rippled like dried leather. But his eyes, deep brown and intelligent, watched them with intense curiosity. Eliza didn't look away, didn't flinch. She simply raised her hand in greeting. Tom disappeared from view, but a moment later, his door opened just enough to set something outside. Another carved figure. This time, a small bird with wings spread for flight. The storm rolled in from the mountains like God's own fury. Black clouds swallowed the sky whole, and lightning split the darkness with violent white veins. Eliza had seen prairie storms before, but this was something else. This was the kind of tempest that reshuffled the landscape, that tested everything man had built against nature's rage. The ranch hands scrambled to secure the livestock, while Sam shouted orders above the screaming wind. From the main house, Eliza watched the bunkhouse where Tom sheltered. The old structure groaned under the assault, and then she heard it. The crack of timber giving way. Part of the roof peeled back like paper, rain flooding through. Without thinking, she grabbed a lantern and ran into the storm. The wind nearly knocked her down, rain hitting like frozen needles, but she pushed forward. Tom's door was barricaded from inside. "Tom, the roof's failing. You need to get out." No response. She threw her shoulder against the door once, twice. On the third impact, it gave way. Inside, she found Tom frantically trying to protect something from the rain pouring through the collapsed roof. Not valuables or clothes. Books, journals, sketches. His mother's things. Water was already damaging pages, ink running like tears. "Help me," he said, his voice rough from disuse. It was the first time she'd heard him speak. Together, they gathered the precious items into an oilcloth. "The main house," she said. "We need to get to the storm cellar." Tom shook his head violently. "I can't." "I haven't been inside since." Lightning struck nearby, the thunder immediate and deafening. A beam crashed down where Tom had been standing seconds before. Eliza grabbed his scarred hand without hesitation. "Your mother wouldn't want you to die protecting memories of her. Come on." Something in her fierce certainty broke through his paralysis. They ran through the apocalyptic storm, Tom's arm shielding the wrapped journals. Inside the main house, Eliza pulled open the cellar door. They descended into dusty darkness, the lantern casting wild shadows. Above them, the house shook but held. They sat on old wooden crates, soaked and shaking, listening to nature's violence overhead. In the lamplight, she could see Tom clearly for the first time. The burns covered his left side, from temple to hip where his shirt had torn. "You didn't look away," he said quietly, wonder in his voice. "Everyone always looks away." Eliza met his gaze steadily. Then, without words, she turned and lifted her own shirt enough to show her back. Whip scars crisscrossed her skin, some old and white, others still pink. 3 years ago, Pike decided I needed correction. Said my Lakota blood made me prone to savagery. 20 lashes to drive out the heathen. She lowered her shirt and faced him again. Tom stared, understanding dawning in his eyes. "We match," he said simply. "Different fires, same marks." She nodded. "My grandmother told me scars are the body's way of writing our survival story. Every mark says we faced something terrible and lived. That's not ugly. That's strength." Tom carefully unwrapped one of his mother's journals, showing her sketches of wildflowers. "She would have liked you." She collected broken things and helped them grow. The storm raged for 3 more hours. They spent it reading his mother's words together, sharing stories of loss and endurance. When they finally emerged, the ranch was battered but standing. The bunkhouse roof was gone. Sam found them on the porch. Tom's first time outside in daylight in 2 years. Dawn became their time. Before the ranch hands woke, before the world demanded anything from them, Eliza and Tom met in the garden. She taught him the Lakota words her grandmother had whispered over healing herbs. Pajuta for medicine, Wamakaskan for all living things. He repeated them carefully, his damaged throat making the sounds rough but earnest. In return, he showed her his journals about cattle breeding, his dreams of creating a hardier breed that could survive the brutal winters. "See, if we crossbreed the Texas Longhorns with the Scottish Highland cattle," he explained, sketching as he talked, "we get animals that can handle both heat and cold, stronger, more resilient." His passion transformed him. The scars faded into the background when his eyes lit up, discussing genetics and adaptation. Eliza found herself leaning closer, not to see the drawings, but to watch his face come alive with possibility. They worked side by side, her planting medicinal herbs while he repaired the garden fence. Their silences grew comfortable. Sometimes their scarred hands would brush while reaching for the same tool, and neither pulled away. The ranch hands noticed the change. Tom was outside, visible, working. Some still stared at his burns, but others began nodding greeting. Sam watched from a distance, a satisfied expression replacing his usual worry. One morning, Tom surprised her. "Teach me to make the soup, the one you left that first night." They stood together in the kitchen, her hands guiding his as they prepared the healing broth. "Why that soup?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. "It tasted like being cared for, like someone saw me as more than just scars." She understood. Food could be medicine for more than the body. As weeks passed, their dawn meetings expanded. He taught her to read the sky for weather, to understand cattle behavior, to see the ranch as a living system. She taught him that healing wasn't about hiding damage, but honoring survival. They created their own language of gestures and half-smiles, of shared understanding that needed no words. The main house began to feel less like a museum and more like a home. But not everyone was pleased with Tom's emergence. Riders had been spotted on the ridge, watching the ranch. Pike's men, Sam confirmed. "He's not done with us," Sam warned one evening. "He sees Tom getting better, you getting stronger, and it threatens his story about contamination and corruption." Tom's jaw tightened. "Let them watch. I'm done hiding." But Eliza noticed he'd started wearing his gun again. The threat crystallized one dawn when they found a message nailed to the garden gate. "The contaminated woman spreads her disease. Even fire couldn't cleanse the younger Hayworth. Both must be purified." Tom ripped it down, rage shaking through him. "Pike doesn't get to decide who's clean or dirty. Not anymore." Eliza touched his scarred hand. "He's afraid. We're proof that his judgments are lies." That night, Tom made a decision. He moved back into the main house, taking his parents' room. "If they're watching," he told Eliza, "let them see I'm not afraid anymore." She helped him carry his belongings from the ruined bunkhouse. Among his things, she found dozens of small carvings he'd made during his isolation. All of them were of her, captured in wood from moments he'd watched through windows. Her feeding chickens, reading, standing in the rain. "You were hope," he said simply. "I had to hold on to that somehow." Judge Pike arrived with 8 men at noon when the sun was highest and cast the shortest shadows. They rode in formation like they were heading to war, which perhaps they were. Pike dismounted slowly, savoring his moment of theater while his men spread out to block any escape. Eliza and Tom stood on the porch, Sam flanking them with his rifle visible but not raised. The ranch hands had mysteriously vanished, not wanting to choose sides in whatever was coming. 3 cattle ranches have lost stock to poisoning this week, Pike announced, loud enough for anyone listening to hear. "Strychnine in the water troughs, the kind of poison a woman familiar with herbs might know how to make." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Eliza felt Tom tense beside her, his hand moving toward his gun. She touched his arm gently, keeping him steady. "Strange how these poisonings started right after you tried to hang me," she said calmly. "Almost like someone needs a reason to finish what they started." Pike's son, Marcus, shifted nervously on his horse. Eliza noticed his hands trembling, sweat beading despite the cool air. Sam noticed too. "Funny thing about strychnine," Sam said conversationally. "It's not cheap. Takes connections to get that much. The kind of connections a judge's son might have through his gambling friends in Cheyenne." Marcus went pale as death. Pike's eyes flashed to his son, then back to Sam, understanding dawning. "You're deflecting," Pike said, but his voice had lost some authority. "This woman has bewitched the younger Hayworth. Look at him, standing there bold as brass when decent folk know he should hide that face." Several of Pike's men stepped back as Tom moved forward, his scars visible in the harsh sunlight. "The only poison here is your hatred, Pike. You killed 17 people by refusing to admit the cholera came from the contaminated well near your property, not from Eliza's herbs." Pike's face went purple. "You dare accuse me?" Tom pulled out a journal, his mother's careful documentation. "My mother tracked every cholera outbreak for 10 years. Every single one started near water sources on or adjacent to your land. You knew your cattle were contaminating the groundwater, but admitting it would cost you money. So you blamed outsiders instead." The men with Pike exchanged uncomfortable looks. This was new information. Marcus Pike suddenly broke. "I can't do this anymore, Father." His voice cracked like a boy's. "I took the cattle, sold them to cover my debts, then poisoned the evidence so it looked like disease." The confession erupted from him like water from a broken dam. "You made me help frame her because you needed someone to blame, but I'm done lying." Pike's hand went to his gun, but Sam's rifle was already aimed. "I'd think carefully about that next move, Judge." "This proves nothing," Pike snarled, but his authority was crumbling. "The town council will still side with me." Doc Abigail's buggy crested the hill, but she wasn't alone. Behind her rode the saloon girls. Eliza had helped several ranch families, and surprisingly, Mrs. Henderson. They formed a line beside the Hayworths. "Actually," Abigail said, "the council met this morning. Your position has been revoked, Cornelius. Turns out, people don't like being lied to about what killed their families." Pike looked at his son with murderous rage, then at the growing crowd of witnesses. This isn't over. You contaminated filth, both of you. Fire couldn't cleanse him, and the noose couldn't cleanse you, but there are other ways. He wheeled his horse around, his remaining loyal men following. Marcus stayed behind, slouched in his saddle, looking broken. "I'll testify," he said quietly, "about everything. I owe that much to the families who lost people." That evening, after the crowd had dispersed, and Marcus Pike had been taken to town to make his confession official, Tom found Sam in the barn. His older brother was brushing down his horse, movements mechanical, lost in thought. "We need to talk," Tom said. Sam didn't turn around. I figured this was coming. They stood in the same barn where their parents had died, rebuilt now but haunted still. "Mother knew Eliza as a child," Tom said. It wasn't a question. Sam's hands stilled on the brush. "She tried to protect her when Pike first started his crusade against mixed-blood families. Gave her food, taught her letters. Mother saw something special in her." Tom's scarred hand clenched. "Her dying words were about me finding someone who could see past the surface. You didn't just save Eliza to help me. You were fulfilling Mother's last wish." Sam finally turned, his face etched with exhaustion. "Would it have mattered if I'd told you? You were dying in that bunkhouse, Tom. A little more each day. When I saw them about to hang her, I remembered Mother's words. She said broken people could heal each other if they were brave enough to be seen." His voice cracked. "I couldn't save Mother from the fire, but maybe I could save you both from different kinds of burning." Tom's anger deflated into something more complex. "So Eliza doesn't actually care. She's just grateful to be alive." Sam shook his head firmly. "You're a fool if you believe that. I've seen how she looks at you when you're not watching. That's not gratitude. That's recognition. She sees in you what you see in her, someone who survived hell and came out stronger." The brothers stood in the barn's shadows, years of unspoken grief between them. "I should tell her," Tom said, "about Mother knowing her, about all of it." Sam grabbed his shoulder. "No, let her choose you for who you are now, not out of obligation to a dead woman's memory. If you tell her, you'll always wonder if she stayed out of duty or love." Tom wanted to argue, but knew Sam was right. Love built on obligation was just another kind of prison. Later that night, Tom found Eliza in the garden, harvesting herbs by moonlight. "You could leave now," he said quietly. "Pike's lost his power. The town won't come for you. Sam won't stop you. You're free." She straightened, studying his face in the silver light. "Are you trying to get rid of me?" There was hurt in her voice that made his chest tight. "I'm trying to give you a choice," he said. "A real one. Not between the noose and the ranch, but between staying and finding a new life somewhere else. Somewhere without the weight of what almost happened here." Eliza set down her basket and stepped closer, close enough that he could smell the sage in her hair. "What if I already chose? What if I decided weeks ago that this place, these people, you, were worth staying for?" She reached up and touched his scarred cheek. He flinched but didn't pull away. "I know about shame so deep it feels like drowning. I know about being called contaminated, dirty, wrong. But when I see you, I don't see a monster or a victim. I see a man who ran into fire for love, who spent 2 years in exile rather than inflict his pain on others, who carves beauty from wood with damaged hands." Her thumb traced a scar. "I see someone worth loving, Tom Hayworth." He caught her hand, holding it against his face. "I want to be the man you see, but I'm terrified I'll disappoint you. That one day you'll realize the scars go deeper than skin." She smiled, sad and sweet. "Then we'll heal them together, one sunrise at a time. That's what broken people do. They help each other become whole." Neither noticed Sam watching from the house, a satisfied smile on his face. Dawn came with thunder that wasn't from the sky. 40 riders approached the ranch, Pike leading them like some twisted cavalry charge. These weren't townsfolk anymore, but hired guns from the mining camps. Men who killed for silver and asked no questions. Tom had been expecting this. Pike couldn't accept defeat, couldn't let his carefully built kingdom of fear crumble without one last violent gesture. But what Pike didn't expect was that the ranch wasn't defenseless. Doc Abigail had arrived an hour earlier with warning. Behind her came unexpected allies. The saloon girls, armed and angry. Mrs. Henderson with her husband and sons. Families who'd lost people to cholera and now knew the truth. Even Marcus Pike stood with them, seeking redemption through courage. They formed a line across the ranch entrance. A wall of people society had deemed worthless, standing together. Eliza stood at the center beside Tom, no longer the woman with a noose around her neck, but someone who'd found her ground. Pike pulled up short, clearly not expecting resistance. "Stand aside, all of you. This is between me and the contaminated ones." His voice had lost its preacher's confidence. The saloon girl called Red Annie laughed. "Contaminated? You mean like the water you poisoned with your greed?" "We're done with your lies, Cornelius." The crowd behind her murmured agreement, their weapons visible but not yet raised. Tom stepped forward, and for the first time, he didn't hide his scars. The morning sun illuminated every mark the fire had left.
"You called me monster, said I should hide."
"But you're the one who's been hiding behind your Bible, your position, your hatred." His voice carried across the valley. "You let 17 people die rather than admit your mistakes. You tried to hang an innocent woman to cover your sins. Who's the real contamination here?" "Shut your mouth, freak," Pike snarled, drawing his gun. But before he could aim, Eliza moved, not with violence, but with truth. She held up a leather journal, your wife's diary, found in the documents Marcus provided. She knew about the poisoned water, begged you to fix it. You let her die from that same cholera rather than admit fault. Pike's face went white. Several of his hired guns exchanged glances, suddenly unsure what they'd been hired for. "She was weak," Pike said, but his voice broke. "Always defending the unworthy." Tom's voice rose with controlled fury. "She was the only clean thing in your life, and you let her die for pride." The words hit Pike like physical blows. His hand shook on his gun. That's when Marcus stepped between, his father and the others. "Enough, Father. Mother wouldn't want this. She loved this town, these people. All of them. Even the ones you called dirty." The standoff stretched taut. Then one of Pike's hired guns spoke. "This ain't what I signed on for. Family disputes and dead wives? I'm out." He turned his horse and left. Others followed. The army Pike had assembled dissolved like morning mist, leaving him with only 3 loyal men. Faced with the entire community, even they looked uncertain. Pike's kingdom had fallen not through violence, but through truth. "You think you've won?" Pike spat at Eliza. "You'll never be clean in their eyes. Neither will he." "Scars don't wash off." Eliza stepped forward, Tom beside her. "No, they don't. But they're proof we survived you. And will keep surviving long after you're forgotten." She addressed the crowd. "We've all got scars, some visible, some hidden, but we're still here, still standing, still human." Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, tears streaming. "I threw stones. I stood silent. I'm sorry." Others echoed her apology. Not all, but enough. Pike, seeing his world completely inverted, made one last, desperate move. He spurred his horse forward, gun raised toward Eliza. Tom moved faster than anyone expected, pulling Eliza aside as Sam's rifle cracked. Pike's gun flew from his hand. He fell from his horse, clutching his shoulder, defeated utterly. 3 months had passed since Pike fled Bitter Creek Valley. His authority crumbled to dust, his name spoken only as a cautionary tale about the poison of hatred. The ranch had transformed into something neither Tom nor Eliza could have imagined. The garden sprawled across 2 acres now, medicinal herbs growing alongside vegetables, beauty mixed with purpose. People came from 50 miles away seeking Eliza's remedies, no longer calling her contaminated, but calling her healer. This morning was special. Tom stood in their bedroom, struggling with his collar. His scarred fingers had trouble with small buttons, but he refused help. Today needed to be perfect. Eliza appeared in the doorway, her wedding dress simple but elegant, made by the saloon girls who'd become unlikely friends. "You know, we're already married in the law's eyes," she teased, helping with a stubborn button. Sam's paperwork made sure of that months ago. That was survival, Tom said, turning to face her. This is choice. I want the whole valley to see me choose you, scars and all. She kissed his scarred cheek, then the unmarked one, then his lips. And I choose you. Every sunrise, every storm, every quiet moment between. They decided on simple rings, forged from horseshoe nails by the ranch blacksmith. Stronger for being reshaped by fire, he'd said with a knowing smile. The ceremony took place in the garden at sunset. Doc Abigail officiated, having gotten herself ordained through a mail-order program just for this purpose. Sam stood as Tom's best man, pride evident in his usually stoic face. Red Annie stood with Eliza, having declared herself the bride's sister in all but blood. The crowd included everyone from ranch hands to reformed townspeople, even Marcus Pike, who'd become an advocate for justice reform. These two have already walked through fire, Abigail said, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. They've been marked by life's cruelty and chosen to see those marks as maps of survival rather than shame. Today, they choose to write a new story on each other's hearts. Tom and Eliza exchanged vows they'd written themselves, speaking of scars and healing, of judgment transformed into acceptance, of love growing in unlikely soil. As they kissed, sealing their union, Eliza whispered something only Tom could hear. "I'm carrying our child." Another survivor to add to this garden we're growing. Tom's eyes widened, then filled with tears that had nothing to do with sadness. He placed his scarred hand on her still flat belly, feeling the future growing beneath his palm. The crowd cheered, not knowing the secret but sensing the joy. Later, as the celebration continued with dancing and Doc Abigail's surprisingly strong moonshine, Tom and Eliza walked to the hill overlooking the valley. The gallows where she'd almost died had been torn down. The wood used to build a schoolhouse. All children were welcome there, regardless of blood or birth. "My grandmother would have loved this," Eliza said, watching the sun paint the sky purple and gold, healing growing from hurt. Sam joined them, quiet for a moment. "Mother knew this would happen," he finally admitted. "Not the details, but this. She said love grows strongest in broken ground if you're brave enough to plant it." Tom and Eliza looked at him in surprise, but he just smiled and walked back to the party, leaving them with that truth. They stood together, scarred hands intertwined, watching their land that no longer felt like exile but like home. The ranch thrived, the town healed, and in a valley once poisoned by hatred, something clean and strong took root. Two broken people had become whole, not by hiding their damage, but by choosing to see it as proof of their power to survive, to love, to bloom, despite every attempt to crush them. The scars remained, but they no longer hurt. They simply told the story of how love conquered judgment, how hope defeated fear, and how sometimes the most beautiful gardens grow from the harshest ground. If you were moved by Tom and Eliza's journey from judgment to acceptance, from isolation to love, remember that your own scars tell a story of survival too. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel for more powerful tales of redemption and unexpected love. Tomorrow's story will touch your heart just as deeply. Until then, remember that broken ground can grow the strongest roots.